Hello, everyone. We welcome you to another episode of the Cosmic Matrix podcast with your hosts, Bernhard and Laura Matsu. And things are changing quickly, a lot of happening in the world. And what we really want to focus on this podcast is the topic of the Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. And it seems like there are two realities intersecting at the same time, or there's a sort of timeline reality split, as we talked about before. And you made a very good post, a while back about, existing in this world right now. It seems like 1% of the population lives in a certain reality, and another percentage of the population lives in a complete different reality.
Yeah.
Right. What was exactly what you wrote?
I said, never has it become more apparent than it has this year that you can be standing next to another person, being existing in two completely alternate realities. And by the way, I just the reason why I said never has it been more apparent is because that's pretty much the way that we exist in general, we can both be at the same event and perceive it different ways, so that happens all the time, but now it's just become more obvious. And then you also have people grouping together on one certain timeline where they're really afraid of COVID and they're masking up and, sanitizing everything and social distancing and doing all that. And then you have the people who just don't, buy into this fear program about the virus and are just living their lives regularly. And I actually had that moment. We were traveling out of town. And I started to realize, I don't know, I think I kind of float around in my own little reality sometimes, but I started to realize and really connect to people and see, wow, these people are really afraid of me, Yes. And the hike we went to the other day, which I also posted about, this was when it really clicked. We were on a hike somewhere in Sedona, and on
that, that was deep into nature.
Yeah, we were an hour or two in 2 hours into the canyon. Yeah, exactly. And so we walked by these people, and they were wearing masks, and they turned their backs to us as we walked by them. And then we walked about 50 to 100 feet away. And I looked behind me, and their backs were still turned to the path. And I was like, what are they doing? Are they looking at a bird or something? And I realized they were literally waiting. They didn't want to walk through the air that we walked through.
Yeah, they purposely turned away from us with their masks on.
Yes. And then they wouldn't even walk through the area for at least a minute after. And that's when I really clicked to me. I was like, I don't even know if they even give people directions to do such extreme things, but it just made me realize oh my God, this is going to last for a very long time. And it's not going to go away, even if there is even people are saying, the people who push the vaccine are saying, even if we know they have a vaccine, this still isn't going away. You're going to still have to wear a mask and live like this forever.
Dr. Fauci literally said that recently.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
You get the vaccines, it will still be good to social distance and wear masks.
Yeah.
But these people are totally, that's what I realized too on the hike was fascinating, because I'm also extremely considerate. I'm trying, really being nice, greeting them, trying to look into their eyes. They won't have it. They didn't respond. They didn't look into your eyes. Completely taken over by Wetico, that fear virus. It's like an infection. Yeah. Like an alien virus, like a predator that has taken them over.
And it's really sad. In that moment, it felt like they don't even treat you like a human. They just treat you like a bundle of potential germs,
Exactly.
It's very dehumanizing to be treated like that by another person. Doesn't matter what their reasoning is, And so that's when it really clicked. And I had that idea for a while. It was what, even 10 years after this, people could still be wearing masks everywhere.
Yeah.
Remember post September 11th? Because that was opposition. That was a Saturn, Pluto opposition. Mm-hmm. And then remember how much traveling changed after that? This is a conjunction. So astrologically, quite a bit stronger, but also will change history.
Yeah. And I also noticed, we went then a few days ago down to Phoenix, a bigger town. We had to go shopping, clothes and whatnot. So we went to a mall. It was a very interesting experience. Haven't been in the mall in months. And I didn't wear a mask. I'm not, even it said at the entrance of the mall, right?
Don't wear a mask unless you have a health condition.
Yeah, so I'm like, I have a health. I'm allergic to bullshit. First of all, like I cannot wear a mask. Period. So I went inside, and there were like there was on the weekend. It was hundreds of people. It was packed. I was literally the only one.
There was one other guy.
There was one. Yeah. Saw one guy passing by. It's kind of like recognizing each other, but everyone literally was wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And most of them, I realized, are just going along with it.
Yeah, of course.
And that's the problem, though. Yeah. Like, even though they know it's bullshit, but they just do because everybody else is doing it. They don't want to.
Well, they don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. What happened is we went into a store that had their own policy that basically said you can't be in the store without a mask. So you can enter the mall, but you can't be in the individual stores.
I went to the store anyway, I didn't go on a mask, and the guy came up to me, hey, you have to put on the mask. And I'm like, no, I can't. And then, well, you can still check out. We can still take your money.
Yeah.
But you have to leave the store.
That's it's all up to individual store policy.
But
so people aren't, but by the way, I just want to touch on that. People aren't just going along with it just because whatever. They're doing it because they know if they don't, they can't go into the stores and buy things, basically. It's going to be the same thing with like the vaccine certificate to travel. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
So people will get the vaccine even though they don't want to because they want to go to a concert or to travel or whatever.
The corporations. But on that note, I think civil disobedience is very important in this day and age. The more, we just do not go along with these draconian regulations, which are unconstitutional anyways, especially in the US, right? The more power we would really have. And at this point, I'm also more actively supporting businesses. There are a few local businesses here that do not enforce the masks. Even the employees, they don't wear masks. I actively support these businesses, especially smaller businesses.
Yeah.
And I actively do not support businesses that enforce masks. I'm like, okay, you're not going to get my business.
Yeah.
Period.
Especially like I heard it's kind of scary. I mean, I've kind of just realized that the days of like freely traveling are over and like just looking back on those times when I was able to do that. But I heard the guy from Walk Away, Brandon Straka, I think his name is. He was in an airport recently and there was an armed guard walking around and asking people to pull the mask up over their nose. So that's what I notice. A lot of people don't pull it over their nose. So that's like the next level of policing is like literally asking people.
And we do know scientifically that masks do not work. I mean, you even got put into Facebook jail for posting a scientific study. Was it the Denmark study?
Yeah, the Denmark study. It's in Spectator. Where they did I think it was a randomized controlled trial. It was basically the highest quality of scientific evidence you could get. It was written by a professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford. The study wasn't done by him, but the article was written by him. And he posted on his Twitter that it was being censored on Facebook, but even today get even further. They were literally even jailing people for sharing that article.
Yeah.
Like from written by a professor of Oxford. Like it's just the level of censorship is just astounding, actually. Yeah. Like because they don't know what to do at this point. There's a lot of really smart people who are actually also waking up because you just need a firm sense of logic, basically.
Common sense.
Exactly.
Even if you look factual, the survival rate is 99.997%.
Yeah.
Right. And now we're in the flu season. Now everybody has COVID again, apparently. There's an extreme lockdown in California. The mayor of LA, Garcetti, and the governor installing draconian regulations. But then the sheriff of the
California Ventura County, they're coming out and saying they won't
enforce it.
Yeah,
it's unconstitutional. So that's what's happening. Again, that kind of splitting. So people are there's more crackdown, so to speak, draconian laws and imprisoning people.
Yeah.
But more people are at the same time awakening and saying, what the fuck,
Mm-hmm.
So there's like the counter push, which needs to happen. And there's been a lot of protests. I think more in Europe, people were going in the streets to protest the lockdowns as opposed to the US. But in the US, what we have going on here is this whole election fraud, which is also now started with Giuliani and Sidney Powell, all the lawsuits in the different states. Lynn Wood as well. They're amazing warriors, but the mainstream media the Mockingbird media is not reporting it. They're still daring to say that there's no evidence of fraud.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that Giuliani, they have thousands of affidavits sworn.
Hundreds, not thousands, but they have thousands of pages of affidavits, hundreds of witness testimonies. And
under oath, Yeah. So the evidence is there. You just need to look at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, the mainstream media has just gotten to the point where they're just blatantly lying at this point. It's like really
gaslighting, lying, propaganda.
Yeah, and they justify it. Like, I don't know if you listened to any of the Project Veritas. It was awesome. He somehow got on the morning conference call with all the producers, including
CNN.
and them talking about their agenda for the day, and they basically on one of the calls are like literally talking about, oh, we don't need to talk about the Hunter Biden story, and just telling people what stories to avoid, even saying that, I forget what they said about Rudy Giuliani, but like talking shit about Rudy Giuliani, and basically they called him a useful idiot, actually, and I think actually, like, the thing is like a part of them in their own self-righteousness, I think, believes the bullshit that they're saying. That's the whole thing. Like, I think about that a lot. I was like, did they actually know that they're lying, or have they bought into their bullshit? And chances are, on a conscious level, they've actually bought into their bullshit.
That's a really good question, because I've been thinking we've talked about this recently. There are various types of people, especially in the media. More and more people are waking up. That's why even James O'Keefe from the Project Veritas, who's now leaking these Zoom calls or editorial calls from CNN because of a whistleblower within CNN. So there are journalists who have a conscience realize this has nothing to do with journalism anymore. This is all lies, propaganda, and all that. So stepping up. But it's an interesting point, because I feel some people, especially on the high ups in the mainstream media, the Mockingbird media, CNN, New York Times, and whatnot, many of them are in on it. They're ex-intelligence operators, actors.
I think few of them. You think many of them?
So I don't know. It's hard to say. A few of them. I mean, it's compartmentalization.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So on the high ups, I would feel that they know what's going on, right?
Yeah,
they are part of the deep state, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then they're the quote unquote useful idiots who just go along with it, who just believe the propaganda.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people, because of their self-interest, self-concern, their career concerns, right? They don't want to lose their job, and all of that. They just go along with it.
Yeah.
And then the whole other aspect, people who are severely infected by this media artificially created TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. Like, it's only driven by Trump hating. It's not based on truth and facts. A lot of people who support Biden, it's not because they like Biden or his politics or what, it's just because they hate Trump.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on something about that, like, fear of people speaking out, because that's really important, because it's also becoming more necessary that people start speaking out as time goes on. This woman, she's a scientist who writes about gender, but not in the way that the leftists like. Her name is Dr. Deborah So. I think she's Canadian. I'm not sure. But she said on Twitter the other day, the fear of being canceled and mobbed is worse than actually going through it. Because obviously, if you start questioning, the leftist ideas on gender, where they're basically trying to abandon biology altogether and say that gender is like a construct that you get to decide on. So that's up for debate, but the fear of being canceled is actually worse than actually going through it. Like, you and we've been canceled this year, like, officially, and I've been canceled by my friends as well, like old friends, like any person who I knew from like before my awakening process, who kind of was just friends with me because we had been friends for so long, and they kind of saw me as like the weird spiritual person, they turned heavily against me once I started speaking out. And it actually wasn't that bad, because number one, I didn't have much in common with these people in the end, and it actually kind of showed their true colors. It really showed you, okay, are you just like, if you're willing to attack someone that you know for a really long time for their belief systems or whatever, then they're not your real friend, But the fear of being canceled is actually worse than actually doing it. Because if you have to, I know for myself, like, if I have to work, and I have worked for many jobs in the past, or I had to suppress a part of myself, it was extra draining to have to constantly police myself in those environments to not say the right thing and to be inauthentic, basically.
I've been canceled by the LA yoga wellness community and the conspirituality podcasts.
Yeah.
Put on the list, and all of that is kind of actually fired back because I actually got more exposure for my work on Veil of Reality, the link to some of my articles, and thought, people go there and see how crazy it is, but actually turned more people on. So it's kind of like the saying goes, no, any publicity is good publicity in a sense, right? But yeah, so that's what we are in the times we're in, right? There's a great awakening and also the fear programming and the great reset. So let's talk about this great reset, which is coming more and more to the surface. There was even an article, or on Time Magazine on the front page about the great reset as well.
Yeah. And there was more also major publications that were pushing the Great Reset just beyond Time. And it was coming pretty much in the middle of this like COVID stuff this year.
Exactly. That came out. So what is the Great Reset?
Yeah, so it's organized by the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and it's pretty much like all the powerful people, all the billionaires, Prince Charles, all the globalists. They get together basically to plan the future of humanity without us knowing about it. So they meet in this summit, and people involved are like George Soros, Bill Gates, Greta Thunberg, Al Gore, Prince Charles, and Klaus Schwab. He's kind of like the evil mastermind behind it. Like,
I'm laughing because I have he is the founder of the World Economic Forum, CEO.
Yeah. And he's like a billionaire himself, isn't he? Or something like that. Yeah.
Klaus Schwab. And I'm laughing because when you listen to him talk, you have to, he is the typical, it's sad because he fits the typical Hollywood stereotypical image of the villain has this extreme, strong German accent.
The evil German archetype. Exactly. So it's just really the Trojan horse to implement the globalist, communist, socialist New World Order.
Exactly. So they first announced it in January 2020, talked about the Great Reset, right before it actually COVID truly hit or became more,
Yeah, but keep in mind, this is a Saturn-Pluto conjunction as well.
Exactly, happened around that time. And they then want to officially implement, they first wanted to implement it in January 2021 coming up, but then they're pushed back now to May to officially start, quote unquote, the Great Reset. And they want to get all countries involved. Everything needs to be on the same page and the same board.
Yeah,
right?
The UN is highly tied into it. And the thing is if you were to just read it, their agenda, some people would be like, oh, this sounds good, like sustainable development goals and
fighting climate change.
Yeah, they use all of these catchphrases that appeals to people's like virtue, but then if you analyze how they're going to implement this, what it really basically means is a global totalitarian government, more control for the government and more control for a one world government and less freedom as individual countries and as individuals. So that's really what it comes down to. And this is a long-range plan. This is like a few decades in the works as well.
The Great Reset is basically the official plan of the Marxist, Socialist, Communist New World Order that has been in plan for decades. What we see now didn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Right? And I personally came across already this whole idea of the new Socialist New World Order and what we're seeing happening now already, like in the 90s, when I first heard it from, even I remember David Icke talking about it in the 90s. And one of the goals was also like to destroy individual countries, national sovereignties, and also destroy economies. And I already heard in the 90s that the goal of the globalists was to destroy the U.S. economy, to render it into a third world country. In the sense that what we're seeing now, what they're trying to achieve under the umbrella of COVID, right? And the lockdowns, they're destroying small businesses. They're trying to destroy the economy, the middle class.
Yeah.
And also people are unemployed. They don't have anything. So they need, the support of the state.
Yes,
right? With
yeah.
the payouts, with the dangling carrot of universal income.
Yeah, that's what they want to do. They also want to drive. I mean, America already is deep in debt, like trillions and trillions of dollars, but what they want to implement, they want to get rid of everyone's student loan debts, which sounds great to everyone, but number one, like, where's that money coming from, and number two, like, there's also something to be said about just getting something for free. Like, imagine struggling in the first 5-10 years of your business to pay off your student loan debt, and then COVID hits and someone gets their student loan debt paid off by the government just automatically. Not paid off by the government, actually paid off partially by you as well. So they see COVID as like this great crisis, as a great opportunity, because during these times, I mean, Canada is already rolling along with the Great Reset pretty fast, because they have this, I think it's called like CERB. It's like this coronavirus, like everyone basically who got their job affected by COVID is getting a couple grand at least a month, so once we start moving towards universal basic income, and then also only having a few shops that we can buy things from, like we're really just like, you realize how fragile the United States are, because it would actually only take a few steps to move towards this, you know?
And let's share some quotes from those players, so to speak, from Klaus Schwab himself.
You should say it in your German, extra German.
Now is a historical moment of time, not only to fight the virus, but to shape the system. That's what he would say.
Yeah.
Now is the historical moment of time, not only to fight the virus, but to shape the system. So they're using this COVID crisis, they see this COVID crisis as a great opportunity, literally.
Yeah.
Right. That really said. Even Prince Charles said, who was also speaking at the World Economic Forum, we have a unique but rapidly shrinking window of opportunity to learn lessons and reset ourselves on a more sustainable path. Here's the word again, sustainable. This is under this virtue signaling. Oh, we're doing this better. And it's all under the umbrella of climate change fighting. Even Al Gore, is fear-mongering. It's worse than ever before. And it's whole idea of like make humanity guilty, like you are responsible for everything that's happening in the world.
Yeah.
And they sell the lie of human-made climate change. And that's a whole trigger topic maybe for many listeners as well. I wrote an article about it, and I really recommend, if you haven't read it yet, to read it on my website, veilofreality.com. It's called Climate Change and the Time of Transition, where I look at climate change more from the perspective of the evolution of consciousness, that, for example, yes, climate is changing, but it's not quote-unquote man-made, all of that. There's, man-made even with regards to, geoengineering and all of that, chemtrails. But there's also something bigger happening in the cosmos, in the universe, right? That affects everything. And our consciousness affects even the climate and whatnot in different ways. But it's not because of CO2 and all of that. That's a big lie. The zero, what do they call the...
Zero emissions?
The zero emissions, what they try to achieve, which is nearly impossible anyway, and tax everyone.
Yeah.
Right?
And
make
never
everybody
mind
responsible, and under this umbrella, this virtue signaling of like, we need to save the world.
Yeah, it's called greenwashing. It's
right.
Where people, like corporations, put like a green, like they market their company or their values as being environmentally sound in order to push the agenda further. And never mind the fact that also, as far as like waste and pollution, China is like one of the biggest perpetrators of that. And then as well, they're behind, like there's no one who wants the globalist, socialist, new world order more than China. In fact, they want to be in control of it, so there's many different streams.
And there's another, I want to also quote Klaus Schwab here again. The COVID pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. The world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions. Every country, from the United States to China, must participate, and every industry, from oil to gas to tech, must be transformed. And he even particular points out that Klaus Schwab, he wants to work with the Gates Foundation.
Yeah.
That's a whole other, topic tied with Bill Gates, the vaccinations, COVID vaccine, which is a whole sinister agenda in itself, right? In regards to global population control and social engineering. Even on the side note, we can go on this deeper. Robert F. Kennedy recently came out with a statement to avoid the upcoming COVID vaccine at all costs, because this is not just about detoxing, but it changes your DNA, your RNA genetics, right? And can have permanent damage that is irreversible.
Do you know where he posted that? Because I saw that going around, but I couldn't actually find the original source.
That's a good question. I would imagine on his Twitter. No,
it's not
Instagram?
on. He's used his Instagram, but it wasn't on his Instagram.
Okay, maybe somewhere else.
So I just want to I tried to check the source of that, so I'm not sure where it was posted. So I just want to also put that was okay, just with a grain of salt, just because people tend to share things.
But it is, it ties into also 5G's, even upcoming 6G AI, transhumanism, and injecting people with substances that they can even be then remotely controlled in other ways. I mean, that goes really down the rabbit hole. But really, going back to the Great Reset, essentially it's a massive Trojan horse. Right, it's an archetypal Hegelian dialect of problem, reaction, solution. Right, it's a solution basically. The globalists had the solution already in their pockets before they created the quote unquote problem, which is COVID, right, the pandemic. And now the brainwashed people who believe all the lies and propaganda of this pandemic will welcome their reaction, this totalitarian, communist, socialist, technocratic solution. Right, for their safety. And like you mentioned, even this is it's how the devil works as well with this free stuff. Oh, you have universal income. We're going to give you money. You know, and one of the slogans, very disturbing, of the Great Reset Economic Forum was, what was it?
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
You own nothing, you'll be happy. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And under this virtue signaling of equality and equity, and everybody has access to everything at the same time, right? And but it violates the universal law because there's nothing free in the entire universe.
Yeah,
right?
No, it doesn't violate that law. It's that they're not actually telling you what you have to pay with. Yeah. So they're telling you it's free, but it does come at a price.
It's come at a price in your freedom, and it also a karmic price. You know,
and a long-term price for humanity as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really, people sometimes wonder, why are all these lockdowns and all this craziness happening internationally, if this is a U.S. political, ploy? And the Great Reset kind of ties it all together. Because if you think about it, if this is meant to kind of usher in this globalist, socialist New World Order, then many countries will be pushing the fear and the lockdown so that they can implement it within their country. So it kind of ties it all together. And the UN is really behind it as well.
The UN has always been, for people who know and have done the research over the years, has always been the public face of the New World Order.
Yeah.
Right. So they're just, in cahoots of, the World Economic Forum, Great Reset, they're in cahoots with the UN, with the World Health Organization, with the CCP and all of that, and, the one thorn that's in their eye and their agenda is Trump and the US, right? He was even invited to speak at the World Economic Forum. What was it, earlier this year?
They originally tried to get Trump on board, and they invited him to the one in January, and then they had another one in the middle of this year, I think. I don't know.
No, I saw the speech he gave at the World Economic Forum, and he basically gave the proverbial middle finger, right? Yeah. Speaking out against globalists, against socialism.
Yeah.
And also against the fear-mongering of this apocalyptic idea of climate change fear, especially Al Gore engages that, oh my God, we're in the last 11th hour again,
Yeah.
We're going to destroy ourselves and all of that. So he was speaking out, and shortly after, literally 2 days after Trump spoke at the World Economic Forum,
George Soros
came out, who is also big in cahoots with Klaus Schwab and all these people, and said that the 2020 US election will determine the fate of the whole world.
And this was 2 days after Trump spoke at the World Economic Forum.
Exactly.
And then he also said, this was earlier, actually. He said, clearly, I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020. I mean, that in itself is just such a sociopathic statement. Like he has the
Who is the guy to say that anyway? Nobody elected him.
because he understands that he has so much influence, you know. So he feels confident in the fact that he could basically not get Trump elected, and you see that with him. Like electing all the DAs who keep letting people out for the riots and Antifa. And like, I mean, that's a whole other story on its own. But
he was also speaking at the UN in November 2019. Trump was speaking at the UN, also giving the proverbial middle finger right before COVID happened and basically speaking out literally against the globalists, right, against their agenda. So he made it clear that, no, we're not going along with that. And that's what we're seeing happening right now. That's why with the election fraud and everything, the globalists' puppet is Biden. They need him to come in, right?
They'll eliminate him, though, too.
Yeah, he's just a puppet. He's just expendable. But he needs to, quote unquote, defeat Trump in order to, so they can get along with the Great Reset in the U.S. Is being destroyed from within.
Yeah.
So that's what we're seeing. It doesn't mean, again, you know, we're not implying, and we have talked about this before, that Trump is the savior of the world. Like, there's so many factors coming in. Even with my impression right now is that Trump will stay another 4 years. The election fraud will be very obvious. It doesn't mean that it all just will go away.
No,
right?
It'll actually get worse.
It get worse, will intensify, right? This still plays a part. We need to step up ourselves. It's not projecting savior qualities externally completely. But he's a thorn in the eye of the socialist globalists.
Yeah, because he pulled out of the WHO. He also pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's happening, you know. But again, going back, if you read through the website of the World Economic Forum about the Great Reset, as you mentioned before, it kind of sounds great, like this utopian thing. But if you read between the lines, understand, you know, doublespeak, Orwellian language, you know, all of that, it's actually very disturbing. It's almost like a fusion of Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World.
Yeah, they also want to, and what is it called? Agenda 21? Is that the one?
That was, now it's extended to Agenda 2030.
Sustainable development goals and stuff. Like I actually lived at a place which taught the sustainable development goals at one point, the eco village, and it sounded really good on paper, you know, but when I actually read up about it, a lot of the values that we were living by out there went against the SDGs, which was also for people no longer to own land. They wanted to just cramp people into apartments and stack them on top of each other, less space for individuals, you know.
So basically now we also saw on the website that in 2021, in May, you know, that's their next summit, so to speak, I think, in Lucerne this time, Switzerland, and it will be used to introduce, the World Economic Forum will be used to introduce via a network of connected big tech corporations, because big tech is in it as well, as we obviously already realized, online activist movements and compliant local and national governments, something they call the Great Reset. It's a commitment that they have to use the panic and fear basically generated from the pandemic as a means to reshape all of our economies and move to a new form of, quote, capitalism, which is more like a Marxist, socialist, communist, technocratic fusion of all the worst systems, focuses on net zero emissions. So
yeah, and I'd also just like to, you know, like people always ask me when I talk about this topic, like, what do we actually do about it, you know? And the number one thing to do is, since they are trying to control people through fear, you know, you have to, in these times, you have to actually develop a better relationship with your fear. Even if you want to go out without a mask, for instance, you could have someone yell at you or project on you or do some crazy shit, you know? So it's about developing a better relationship with your fear to start with, you know? Like that's where it begins, because, you know, we can be informed about these topics intellectually all we want, but it also depends on our relationship with fear as well, and not fall into the same doom and gloom mindset that they're actually trying to push, by becoming aware of these topics as well. Like I'm aware of these topics, yet at the same time, like I more imagine like the world that I want to live in, and then I create it through my life's work, basically.
And action. And
right. Literally my whole life and the way that I live my life and the philosophy I like, the work that we offer, the courses we offer, the sessions I do with people, even the passions I have, it's all built around being a person who lives in the world that I want to live in. So rather than like making myself adjust to the world that exists right now, which I've removed myself from because I'm self-employed, I really work on things that I'm passionate about. I don't follow orders from anyone. Basically, I work, we work together. That's how I eliminate myself from this system, And so a lot of people wonder, like, what do I do? What do I do? Number one, don't like ask other people what to do for starters, but you need to also find what is your own unique purpose and role to play within this. Because another thing, I think we'll touch on this more later after we talk about the Great Awakening, is we're about to enter a new cycle, a new age, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to talk about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, but this is a 20-year cycle, and it's going to show up in our individual lives in different ways, So if you're holding on to like these old Saturnian structures, i.e. you're looking for like a paycheck from someone who tells you what to do, and they have complete control over even what you say online, now is the actual time to reevaluate that, because there's a huge shift happening, and some people are going to literally still stay trapped within these systems, and then some people are going to make the exit.
Yeah. No, very good, important point. We can shift into that as well. I mean, here's the thing. It's definitely not about getting into doom and gloom. It's definitely about being aware, like we just shared. This is their plan. This is their intention. It doesn't mean that we'll be able to go through with it. It's being aware of it. Even with the vaccination, it sounds, very horrifying. That can create fear in itself. You project into the future. Oh my God, there's going to be mandatory vaccinations. It's going to fuck up my DNA, my whole being. I'm going to get sick, and I'm being controlled remotely, through 5G, 6G, transhumanism. You can go down the rabbit hole of doom and gloom. Even with the Great Reset, it's important to be aware of it, almost know their enemy.
Yeah.
But don't find into the fear. Don't believe that this is going to be the future, period.
Yeah.
Right. And on that note, I also want to mention that I see this a lot, and I recently discussed it with somebody, an online friend on Facebook as well. There's this, and I wrote about it in my article, I think QAnon article a while back, this doom and gloom energy, even within the quote unquote truth movement.
Of course, there's a doom and gloom energy in the truth movement.
But it's like, it's but like my friend said, they like vision that it comes from a very atheistic, nihilistic place where they see traps everywhere.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Everything is a trap. Even the fringe, the tunnel of light is a trap, and we're in this prison. And Trump is the Antichrist, actually, and it's controlled opposition, and Q is an AI program, and like there's no way out. It's just almost a form of paranoia.
It is a form of it's a form of psychosis, is what it is, and it usually, like, I feel like, what is that person carrying that they're fearful of everything around them? That's the first question I think of, because I know for myself, when I was very distrustful of my environment, every person in it, that came from my own trauma, from my own wounds, So we have to really check ourselves. And I'm sure people who are listening to our podcast, is there's a way, and I think this is actually the way out of actually approaching these kinds of topics, of being able to look at it objectively.
Yes.
But in order to do so, that's easier said than done, because people think that looking objectively is just escaping into your head. It's being able to be like, okay, this is information. This is how it affects me. This is what it brings up for me, So if there is fear there, explore that, use that as a process of self-inquiry. But at the same time, you can maintain some distance, because you can witness not only the information, and you can also look at the information objectively, which is also key, but you can also look at your response to it, because that's really like the self-knowledge, the inner part, like the Great Awakening, just a other part of the topic of this podcast is yes, it is definitely facilitated through waking up to more corruption and craziness in the world. But the internal process is what created this. Like, I actually truly believe that the fact that like all of this shit is coming out is a testament to human consciousness as well. Because it's like, okay, shit is coming out, shit is hitting the fan. I know from working with many people on their own spiritual path that when shit starts coming out and shit starts hitting the fan, it usually means that there's a positive evolutionary process taking place there.
Exactly. That's what, you made a very important point. Also, just want to touch on some of them, what you just meant, just looking at it objectively. It doesn't mean going into the head, disconnected from your body, but using it as self-inquiry. That's what Gurdjieff called self-remembering. Very important practice. What is self-remembering? Meaning being aware of your internal state and the external state at the same time. Easier said than done. It takes practice. It takes mindfulness, not mindfulness, pop spirituality, but really a deeper embodied presence. And being curious about your reactions, even with information, whatever it brings up within you, then look within what it brings up with you. Where's it coming from? Where's the fear really tagging in, and where's it coming from?
Like, what are you really afraid of?
Instead of then like externalizing, oh my God, we are fucked and this and that.
Yeah, and this doesn't mean not to speak out, actually. The more that you can gain that objective awareness on your own inner state, the more that it actually can propel you to do what's right. Like, you and I know, especially for me, like, because I started speaking out about these topics more this year, and it really felt like, all of my wounds around being bullied or feeling ostracized or feeling like an outsider, all of these wounds that I've carried my whole life, like, got like ignited through speaking out and having people project on me, and there's a part of myself, this kind of like objective witness who is able to hold that like wounded part of myself as I did the right thing anyway, because also this objective witness, observer that we develop through intentional self-work also knows the difference between right and wrong, and it's our wounded parts that that tend to go towards whatever feels comfortable or whatever will keep us small, so that objective part can actually hold the wounded part to be like, okay, even with me, like sometimes if I like go into like the grocery store here, which you don't have to wear a mask, sometimes I'm like, fuck, like I can just feel people's eyes on me and it makes me uncomfortable. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to do this because it actually, for me, it's a symbol of protest at this point, and I can hold that part of myself who's a little bit afraid, so we have to be able to have that ability to witness and hold ourselves through these times, and not be externally focused. Yeah.
Now, you made also a very great point in analogy about all the stuff that's coming up out of the shadows in the world and exposed, and the craziness, which always been there, but it's not coming now to light. It's actually testimony. It's a sign that we are in a shift of consciousness, actually in the positive sense. Yeah. Because it has to come out. The dark, as Carl Jung said, like with the one doesn't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Yeah, in a sense, right? Yeah. So that's what's happening, and then that also ties into the self-work process, because what people understand, anybody who's sincerely involved in self-work, on a basic psychological level or even spiritual esoteric level, it's not a comfortable process. Yeah. Shadow work is messy. It brings up stuff you don't want to feel, you don't want to see. Yeah. So many people have this misconceptions, the awakening process is just external information or just engage in a little bit self-work and then, I feel good and love, light and bliss. No, we experience it each time when we have a course, even our current course installment of Embodied Soul Awakening, which we go through with a group of 25 people. We know it works when this stuff comes out, when people get triggered, when, when these emotions that have been buried are coming out, which we have suppressed for so long. Yeah. Right. But that's where the rubber hits the road, and most people don't want to go there. Yeah. Right. And then they start externalizing because going back to the awakening process, the true great awakening, right, which has also been kind of used by the Q crowd and whatnot. And it's about also like exposing evil in the world and becoming aware of that. But a true awakening has not much to do with how much you're aware of the matrix and the evil forces externally, but your own soul embodiment, your own connection to God and the divine. That's the true awakening.
Exactly. And I think it's also the thing that this world, like this Western world, sorely needs. I was watching this video on the Epoch Times about socialism and communism and how they really just erode the moral fabric of society. Because if you erode the moral fabric of society, you have a bunch of people who don't know the difference between right and wrong and just do whatever feels good.
Yeah.
Very similar to people actually on the spiritual path, you know, it's like majority of people on the spiritual path are just doing it to feel better, to feel some relief. That's all fine and good, you know, but also, you know, the key premise of Buddhism is life contains suffering. And the more that you meet your suffering and the more that you meet your own death, you know, the more that you actually start to truly value life as well. Yes. So it's not about, and this is like, I would say like 80 to 90% of people on the spiritual path actually do it to feel good and to prop up their ego. And it's a form of spiritual materialism because you have to be a certain type of person to want to actually go into those places. You know, you have to have some actually faith that your soul has to have some sort of faith that this is what I'm here for. And it doesn't matter how much it hurts, and it doesn't matter how much it changes my life or, you know, just changes my world around me, you know?
Yes. Like, that's what most people waiting for, the world to change for them.
Yes.
Right. But we need to engage now.
Yeah.
You know, to be the, you know, as, you know, the Gandhi saying, and Gandhi is a topic on its own, right? But being the change you want to see in the world. There's truth to that, right? Yeah,
and that's the opportunity for the evolution of consciousness. And I see, you know, with all of this corruption being exposed, what it actually presents people on a silver platter is like the ability to be disillusioned by the world, you know, which is actually a really important stage on the spiritual path. Like, I think mine was like literally when I was like 14, I read Adbusters before Adbusters became the establishment, where they were talking about how the media just brainwashes people, you know, and just affects the psyche of people. And I realized in that moment, I was like, holy shit, because I was like listening to Britney Spears when I was like 12, you know, like I grew up around the whole pop culture, and I realized, wow, like I've been entrapped by this system who just wants to control my mind, you know? And that was a profound disillusionment process. And I know from that point on, I can never look at billboards or advertisements the same. And that happened when I was 14. But a lot of people have bought into this mainstream culture, and it's gotten also very sophisticated. I have to say, the leftist agenda has really played on people's need to feel like good, great people. And I really realized the other day, you know, the best way to get a good person to do some evil things is convince them that they're doing a good thing. You know,
right, exactly.
It's so sociopathic and manipulative. And so, you know, a lot of people have bought into this mainstream culture as being basically like their Lord and Savior, you know, like
it's like the ultimate virtue signaling. There's a holier than thou, right? We are, you know,
and just but trusted in like this is the cycle we're going through. Is Saturn represents, you know, legacy media, legacy government, the royal family. You know, people have put all of their trust in these old systems which are breaking down. So they can either take this as an opportunity for awakening and be like, holy shit, like what's happening to the world that I knew, you know, and wake up to it, and then also deal with their own inner process in relation to that.
Exactly. I mean, that's going you know, talking more about this great awakening. That's the counterforce, because that's whatever the great reset and the agenda of the globalists and what's happening in the world. Right. That's their plan. It's been their plan all along. I mean, that's I said as many before. I'm having the time of my life right now, because what's happening right now, I've seen coming for the past 20 years. I've talked about many others as well. Yeah. And now it's becoming more obvious. It didn't happen overnight. It's been building up, right? This is the end game, right? But it is an opportunity, right? This is an immense opportunity. And, you know, it's an immense opportunity for awakening, because why great awakening? A lot of people who have been quote unquote asleep, and I've experienced, people have approached me, you know, who dismissed me before, even attacked me, coming to me or writing to me, you know what? I can see now you've been right all along. It's not about popping up my ego, but the point is that people are starting to see like, oh my, something is off, something is not right. If you have some sort of healthy spiritual immune system, like a bullshit meter that works within you, you see that something is not right. And then naturally people start to question. Yeah. And the more you push people, the more you take their freedoms away, right? There's a large percentage that will like, hold on, this is not right.
Yeah. On a basic, like primal level, if you go out in the world and you see the fear in people, you realize this is not, we're in a really bad place for humanity. We're in a really fragile place, you know, like all you have to be is tune in. Like for me, I actually like tend to want to like elect to check out because it's so intense. Like it's actually scary to see how afraid people are of each other.
No, that's the fear virus, and that's what we need to counter, because you mentioned something before. It's kind of quote unquote almost easy to get along. Like, oh, I'm just going to wear a mask, not to deal with anybody's energies and whatnot. But that ties into the saying, again, the famous quote by Krishnamurti, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing if you go along with the program.
And there's also, there's a famous quote, I don't forget who it's by, but, you know, like the cost of silence is actually far greater than speaking out. So if you just go along with it, you know, and just be like, whatever.
I think Jordan Peterson said that.
Yeah. And there's a few people I think who said it, but that's the main thing, you know, like for me, I felt very vulnerable to be quote unquote breaking the rules in America because I'm in an immigration process and whatnot. But at a point I was like, you know what? Like I just kind of like weighed the odds. I was like,
at some point it's listening to your conscience.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not even just listening to conscience. It's like looking at it logically and practically, you know, like for some people, they literally can't even enter into certain stores without wearing a mask. And that's in California where we just were, you know, but you can enter into the same stores in Arizona, you know, as well. But yeah, so there is these two different realities, you know, at the same time. And I see even the right, you know, like through their own Christian lens, they actually have a moral framework, you know. Right. The left doesn't. They seem like they act like they have a moral framework, but it's based off of like critical race theory mainly, actually, and the idea that all like of America is the worst and needs to be destroyed and it's racist.
Yeah, there's no spiritual foundation.
There's no spiritual foundation, and this framework was literally invented by people who had PhDs who wrote a couple books that really went viral in culture. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. You know, like a Buddhist has a moral framework. You know, a Christian has a moral framework. We all have these like the point of religion is, you know, to give us a moral framework so that we know how to operate within reality to such an extent that we know how to like be good people, basically. Yeah. And then it reaches the other extreme where it becomes dogmatic, right? But what we have in the West, you know, is we don't have a strong moral framework. Like Christianity got pushed to like as being like, oh, you know, like you're just fundamentalist Christian.
Understandably so, because it's been used and abused. Even the Pope, I mean, like we forgot to mention him. Pope Francis is a full-on deep state asset and part of the Great Reset Economic Forum and all of that. And he even came out recently defending the lockdown and supporting even vaccinations and all of that.
Yeah, it's like that. Who's that guy that Archbishop who came out and wrote that letter about Trump?
I forgot his name, but that was an amazing
really
letter.
Great letter.
He even also spoke out against the Pope.
Yeah, he spoke out against the Catholic swamp. You know, there's a swamp within all of these arenas, you know, but the point is that this sense of religious, having a strong religious foundation is actually what gets in the way of them implementing socialist, communist, you know, values, basically. Because if people have that framework to go by, then that will often clash with what they're trying to sell people, basically.
And I think on that note, if I may expand on that, talking about God and faith, and we talk a lot about the importance to have a relationship to the divine, and even in our program, you have the fourfold approach on all levels. It's integral, right? You have the basic, the physical, the emotional, psychological, intellectual, and also the spiritual, obviously. But ultimately, it is, you know, not spiritual bypassing. You need to do your inner work. But, you know, I got very inspired by the attorney or lawyer, also Lynn Wood, right, who works with Sidney Powell.
Yeah.
If you follow his tweets, this guy has become fearless in his way he speaks out more and more. Really, truly inspiring. But then some of his followers ask him, why do you have so much courage? And he says, like, because I have faith in God, or my relationship to God, to the divine.
Yes.
And that I can see in myself as well. People sometimes ask me, why do you have so much courage to do this and that? Well, yeah, there's courage. Courage, also definition is to do despite fear, just to act with courage. That's the warrior attitude of Castaneda's teachings as well, right? But it's also, the more I have a stronger relationship to the divine, my true self, and have faith, understanding there's a much bigger process happening, you know, I get out of my own self-interest, my own ego shell, right?
Yeah.
Or my own fears. It's being transcended, so to speak. And that's where the fearlessness comes in. So it's really about having the spiritual foundation, and that gives the strength of what you said, even more, Trump supporters or conservative right wing, whatever you may. And right wing is so much distorted anyways. The left, any time they say something right wing or alt right, they're equated with racism. That's a whole other story David Whitehead and I already talked about. But this is foundation, this having this deeper faith and trust in the divine and in life.
And also, by the way, when you do foster that connection with the divine through a myriad of intentional self-work, which is what we do in our programs, we handle all areas of mind, body, and spirit, is it really does change your consciousness in ways that you could never, I can't even understand, your ability to perceive things and to see the world is really, changed through that connection to the divine. And even in small glimpses, you start to see things through the eyes of the divine. This is that higher knowledge, Yeah. So you start to see the hidden threads that connect all of reality, and you start to see the larger purpose behind things. Whereas for the most part, what people get their happiness from is, and this is not bad either, is their relationships, their friendships, media, these are all lower sources of refueling yourself and validation from people. A lot of people know themselves in relation to other people, which is why it's so hard for them to speak out. But if you change that and you know yourself in relationship to God and the divine, that's the game changer, because it's that. This is one of my favorite Tupac quotes. It's only God can judge me, because it's true. This is the only person who you have to answer to.
Quote unquote person.
Yeah. Take feedback from other people, whatever. But at the end of the day, the thing that's going to give you the report card is God, basically. However you want to translate that, you can say it's a self or a source or whatever. I know some people don't like the word God. I just use that as a general term. What I'm saying is that once you know that's the person that you have to answer to every single day, it changes everything.
Yeah, there's a force that transcends it all, divine force, divine will, which our ego has no control over. And that's what you realize too. You go deep in the process, the illusion of control from the egoic perspective, that there's now again a much bigger process happening way beyond what we're seeing playing out in the world stage.
Yeah.
Right? But that's the most important part. And when we talk about connection to the divine God, it also can be trouble for someone who never considered it, who have triggers around God, the word, or mistake it of some guy in the sky, bearded, watching over humanity. Mm-hmm. Because what we're talking about is not an intellectual concept. It's not an intellectual concept of faith, right, or thought, but it is an inner experience.
Yeah.
And that comes only through the sincere aspiration, the sincere inner work, the sincere call.
Yeah.
And then you have the glimpse within, and then you start to see, as it's called in esoteric science, to start to see the unseen. Mm-hmm. Not only the darkness, like the evil behind the appearances, but also the good and how the divine works through seemingly vessels we're not aware of. That the divine is in everything. That there's a bigger process, right? And that trusting the divine, by the way, and that surrender is not a passive state. It doesn't imply non-action. That's a whole misconception of what people have. It's not just cowering in the corner, just praying, please God, help me and whatnot.
Yeah.
No, when you're infused with the divine force, you're infused with your deeper soul purpose, your true self, and act accordingly. It's a very active force. You become even way more powerful force than being, clouded in your personality identity.
Yeah, people don't understand a lot of the things that I write, I know that a lot of things that you write is we're getting inspiration from some force outside of our small ego personality. Every time I write, it's almost like a wave that I know how to recognize and catch, because it's that wave of inspiration, which I don't think comes from my own personal self, although it gets filtered through my personal experience, And I just know that I have to write something or say something or create something, and if it up to my own small limited ego self, I would just be no, I just want to just do my own thing. I wouldn't want to put myself out there, So sometimes the divine actually pressures us to act in a way that's very uncomfortable for our small ego self, which is really important. And on a practical perspective, what this actually begins with, and maybe this is just the lens that I look through it, is this connection with the divine really begins with the connection with your own psychic being, which begins in your own heart, So this means being able to feel your life. And even, I know how hard it is for people these days, but literally feel what's going on in the world. And then you see the situation we're in. Like, I had really this big wake up call when we were hiking, and I saw how afraid these people were of us. And I was like, holy shit, this has such long-term implications for us. That it's actually quite scary, And so that's where it begins, and like opening our heart to life and to our life experiences. And even with we have to also watch out to like wanting to demonize or hate people or call them sheep who are just going along with the program, because the only chance that we have of reaching these people, because we're not going to reach them through information, I'll tell you that, because they're already so brainwashed, that's already fixed in their mind, is actually through relating to them through an open heart. And then that might not even work, but that's the only chance we have.
For the ones who have, who are still reachable, because we also, what we talked about in the past podcast, in the midst of this intersecting of two realities and this timeline reality split as well.
Yeah.
But, let's talk about all of this more in the second hour, especially want to go deeper into the bigger cycles from astrological perspective, evolutionary astrology.
We're going to talk about the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which a lot of people have been talking about lately.
It's coming up in the winter solstice. And let's talk about more. I also want to talk about the Great Reset in light of the other side of the coin of past civilizations, when the divine pressed the reset button and restarted the human experiment, because time is not linear but cyclical. So we are in this very precious time of transition, and talk more about what people can do. But, for people to take away right now, ties also becoming more authentic, speaking out despite your fear with courage. And, don't be afraid to engage in civil disobedience against these draconian regulations, right? Which is an insult to humanity. I always say, have some dignity and respect for yourself. That's really what it comes down to. Right?
And also just think about what is the era that you would love to enter based on everything you've learned from this past cycle, and what didn't work. And I know for myself, this Aquarian era is really about this kind of brotherhood of man, and really seeing humanity as as our family as well, and learning how to see the bigger picture perspective and break outside of our limited sense of self. A lot of people, they just live their lives very stuck in their own little bubble as well, but really look at what are the gifts I have to contribute to this next era in humanity? What's the world that I want to live in? And is my life a reflection of that?
Exactly.
And if not, why not? And also, another aspect I just want to touch on, this whole cycle kicked off with this Jupiter-Saturn. Not Jupiter-Saturn, and it was Saturn-Pluto conjunction, So Saturn represents structure, government, but then Pluto is this transformative process, which I know very intimately, and we really have to be able to have that courage to engage in this transformative process. Because if if the structures in your life aren't how you want them to be now, be willing to enter in the fires of transformation to make it how you want it to be.
Exactly. Let's go deep into this in the second now. And I also like just to let people know, we are about to start our second installment, second round of our online course, Embodied Soul Awakening. We're taking 25 people on the journey for the next 8 weeks. But also just to let you guys know, we will have another the course coming up, the same course starting in February. We haven't done
first or second week of February.
We don't know the date yet, but we open up for applications soon. So stay tuned. Sign up to my mailing list, at veilofreality.com if you're not already. And also, again, if you're not a member yet, in order to access the second hour, you can also sign up to the membership at veilofreality.com.
And also just support our work as well. Even if you're not going to listen to the second hour, if you like our podcast, if you like the writing we're doing in the world, this is an amazing way that you can show your support for us too.
Become Patreon. We would really appreciate it. Thank you guys, and see you soon in the next hour.